Good evening, alien lovers of the interwebs. I'm Alexa, the resident ooky spooky girly, and today we're diving back into the land of true alien tales. Question for y'all, what do you believe when it comes to aliens? Let me know in the comments, and welcome to the top 5 scary real signs of alien life found on Earth. Number 5, an Air Force landing cover-up. So, Quinn Nelson, who wants his location to stay private out of fear for his safety, knew a girl whose dad was stationed at an Air Force base in his state. At the time, there were 2 Air Force bases and 1 Marine Air Station, so he feels pretty comfortable making the story known with those details. Quinn says he went to go see the girl and stay with her family over a weekend, arriving on the Friday, just in time for family dinner. He and the girl decided to walk over to the base movie theater to enjoy some private time, and afterwards were walking back to the family's quarters in the company of many Air Force fellow, tweens and families who also saw the movie. He said that as they were walking, Air Force Air Police personnel began driving down the base housing streets, ordering the theater goers to the nearest base housing residence. A siren or tone was wailing from somewhere, along with a code being repeated that Quinn refuses to name for, safety. The crowd didn't put up any kind of resistance and began moving where they were directed, as if this was a normal occurrence, something Quinn observed as being weird to him, but he wasn't going to be the only one putting up a fuss. When the group he was walking with arrived at a house, his girlfriend, without knocking, just pushed the door open and they all walked in. Quinn said the members of the household were pulling the window drapes closed, setting out folding chairs, offering water, acting like this was like a planned gathering instead of a random occurrence in panic. About an hour or so later, the air police again went up and down the streets giving the all clear, and somewhere the same siren or tone was sounding. Later that night, his girlfriend's family told him he must never tell anyone about what had happened on the base, saying that this was an occurrence that would happen when UFOs would land on base property or nearby, something that was apparently very common on Air Force bases. Anyone want to let me know in the comments section if that's true? Because consider me intrigued. Number 4, a gray alien abduction. Grant Rollins, a resident of suburban Maryland, describes himself as a fairly normal bachelor, living in peace until this all went down in December of 2017. He woke up at 1:30 in the morning to the sound of a break-in and went to the bedroom door to confront the intruder, but was suddenly rendered unconscious as he touched the doorknob. He woke up naked and cold in a pill-shaped glass container. The lid was open, so he was able to stumble out onto the floor around the container, and described feeling sluggish and barely able to walk. But he thought he'd been kidnapped, so he was urgently trying to find an escape route. The room he was in was made of mostly concrete and was plastic with fluorescent lights. He managed to limp into a hallway that was tunnel-shaped and followed a blue glow coming from down the hall. As he walked, he came out of the tunnel and entered a large cylindrical room lined with vehicles on hooks along the walls. They were human vehicles, so mostly Japanese and German cars and motorcycles, but some vehicles were clearly from the American military. In the center of the room was what looked like a metal tree that was 6 stories tall with glowing blue leaves. Now, as Grant stumbled closer, he realized the tree was actually a large metal cylinder, and the leaves were capsules similar to the one he'd woken up in, except these still had people inside them and were radiating a neon blue glow. As he paid more attention to higher up in this tree, Grant noticed some blue wires moving around in the dark area towards the ceiling. These clumps of wires suddenly floated down towards him and turned to reveal that they had faces in them, each with 2 large dark eyes and narrow slits for noses and mouths. He's compared them in appearance to the typical gray alien face from popular media, with 2 of the faces frowning and 1 smiling. Grant passed out once again, waking up later face down in a puddle of his own drool on a glass floor. He was too tired to get up and barely able to tilt his head up just enough to take a look around. The room was circular, about 150 square feet in size, and a bright, sterile white color. One of the tentacled creatures was in the room, but was busy facing away and operating a set of strange controls with no buttons or levers. Out of exhaustion, Grant's head fell back down, and through the glass floor saw that they had risen out of a deep black hole that was dug into a grassy plain where a rock-shaped lid closed around the hole to cover it. This is when he realized he was in a spacecraft and had actually been in a silo of some sort that's here on Earth somewhere. Grant passed out for the last time and was awoken by the sensation of being dropped back head first onto his bed with a hard thud. He checked his phone for the time and saw that it was around 6:30 in the morning. Later that day, he found an object that had been inserted and cauterized into his right leg and experienced a run-in with some men in black suits within 4 days of the abduction. Grant claims that he never believed in abductions, UFOs, men in black, anything out of the ordinary before that day, but now he doesn't have a choice in the matter and is annoyed that there's no official place to get legitimate information or help on the subject. I'm hoping that after talking about this, I don't see any men in black on my way home today. Number 3, the Voronezhsky Abduction. So 34-year-old Vladimir Voronezhsky and his wife 29-year-old Olga were at home with their very young son Arthur and their daughters Vanessa and Angelica one night. Olga had asked the daughters to run an errand, and while returning home, both saw an unusual object in the sky, rushed home, and told their family that they had seen a flying star. When the adults went outside, they saw a distant hovering object in the sky that seemed to move and change shapes. Olga managed to take a photo of the object with her cell phone, but the photo only shows a yellow spot or elongated strip with a black background. The family went back inside, had supper, and, went to bed. And while I would love to end this here, y'all know better about how this is about to go. At around 2 a.m., Vladimir suddenly awoke and saw that the whole room was lit by a whitish violet light, and tried to wake Olga, but she refused to wake up, so he went back to sleep. The bright lights woke up their youngest daughter, Angelica, who ran to wake her mother, so Olga eventually did wake up, saw what the other two had seen, and then woke Vladimir back up. He was amazed to see that the ceiling of the room had apparently disappeared, or become totally transparent. Now, right above them, instead of the ceiling, they could see the open sky and a huge disc-shaped craft hovering right above. Vladimir and Olga ran outside their home, still in their PJs, and could see a hovering disc-shaped UFO emitting the strong lights about 100 feet away. Olga began floating, zooming upwards in a spiral motion, and when Vladimir tried grabbing her legs, he discovered he couldn't control his body. Olga described feeling nauseous, unable to control her body as well. In a state of shock, the couple found themselves teleported inside a room with transparent walls and no furniture. Moments later, the duo witnessed 12 entities enter. The humanoids were short, around 4 feet tall, having 3 fingers on each hand and large heads with smooth gray skin. Now, Vladimir didn't notice any mouths, noses, or ears on them, but noticed their large, black, pupilless eyes. The entities had no visible legs and were moving around like caterpillars. They wore a completely sealed, tight-fitting coverall with masks and hoods that covered their bodies. Only one of the aliens was taller than the rest, easily over 6 feet tall, and stood behind the other small humanoids, with his face not being visible under his outfit. The short entities approached Olga first, placing her in a deep armchair which resembled a gynecologist chair, prompting Vladimir, who was now unfrozen, to attempt to rush towards her, but he ran into an invisible wall or force field. 2 of the aliens approached him now, and he asked, what's going on? And they reassured him telepathically that soon you will be back home. Oh yeah, nothing to be afraid of. Vladimir became rightfully angry and attempted to push the aliens away, but was thwarted by more entities grabbing him in an attempt to restrain him. The aliens asked him why he resisted, staring straight into his eyes each time they communicated, telepathically, before inserting 4 metallic rods into his chest area, paralyzing him completely. From that moment on, he was unable to move, and could only stand there helplessly and watch the aliens experiment on Olga. Somehow they were able to cut into her stomach without her noticing, or using any kind of known surgical instruments. She sensed the smell of her inner organs, feeling unpleasant, but no pain, only tranquility and relaxation. And modern human medicine could apparently stand to learn a thing or two. The aliens seemed to be taking samples from her body and organs, and were apparently now using different instruments to study the organs inside her abdomen. Olga was only able to describe that one looked like a pair of pincers and had 3 clamps. After the strange procedures, the aliens closed and sewed up her stomach. Before the abduction, Olga had been bothered by stomach pains, but after that day, she never suffered from them again. Apparently, the aliens were more interested in communicating with Vladimir, explaining to him that the female is the entity in a stage less developed than the male entity, which I'll beg to differ. The smaller humanoids respectively called the taller humanoid by a word that Vladimir has loosely translated as the professor, who explained to Vladimir that their society was like a huge ant colony. After Vladimir was brought in front of the professor, he asked the entity why they had taken him and his wife, with the taller being answering that it had to be done. Both witnesses understood that having such feelings was, the central interest of the aliens. The tall alien said, we don't understand you. Why haven't you, intelligent animals, destroyed yourselves yet? How can you survive with your emotions? He said that there was a space war going on at that time in the universe, and that the entity that we call God has implanted much information into Earth and the waters of it. Those who are against God, I want that information destroyed. If the Earth is going to be destroyed, the Son of God would arrive to Earth again and will restore everything living it. Well, I think I've heard that story before. Through the transparent surface of the cabin, the duo could see the planet Earth approaching and felt that their spacecraft was slowing down. The couple was returned then back to Earth the very same way they were abducted. First in the smaller module, and then the large disc-shaped craft, and then through the roof of their home inside a beam of light. At 11 a.m. the next morning, Vladimir and his wife awoke, and a while passed before they talked about what had occurred. But after analyzing the mutual identical memories, they understood that what had happened had not been a dream but reality. The whole family underwent extensive medical tests to see if the aliens had left behind any implants and to try and find any traces of surgery. By some mysterious manner, Vladimir lost his gray hairs, and his physical powers of endurance increased after the abduction. Olga was cured of her chronic colitis and gained the ability to make a drunken man sober by placing the palm of her hand on the man's forehead for 2 to 3 minutes. It's a pretty neat ability, but I'm not sure I want to undergo testing for it. Number 2. Lizard beings from Colorado. Back in 1968, Hannah and her family were living in a small town in the west end of Montrose County called Uravan, Colorado. One early summer morning, she was awakened by the barking of the family dog named Tippy outside her bedroom window, which was unusual for the pup, who usually only barked when someone or something was in a yard that wasn't supposed to be. Hannah remembers waking up out of a deep sleep and hearing Tippy constantly barking and wondering why her older brother, who slept in the bunk above her, and her parents sleeping in the bedroom on the other side of the wall, weren't telling Tippy to quit it. So finally, Hannah was fed up and decided to turn over in bed and look out the window, and was met with a sight she didn't believe at first. There it was, a small circular ship with its landing gear down and a hatch with stairs folded down to the ground. Next to the ship were green lizard-like beings with bright yellow eyes, webbed hands that resembled a bow and arrow, and had some sort of tanks on their back. They had thin bodies, were covered in scales, and had V-shaped toes. According to Hannah, the overall mood was that these beings were searching for something, but she had no guesses as to what. Another alien exited the ship, but it was much larger in size than the others and seemed to be giving out orders. This caused Tippy to begin barking aggressively again, upsetting the aliens who began to approach the dog. Hannah instinctively jumped off her bed and rushed into her parents' room in an attempt to wake her mom, but struggled. Her mom slept as if something was wrong, and when she finally awoke was incredibly sluggish in movement. Hannah explained what was going on outdoors and her concern for Tippy, but the mom was unable to see the creatures and wanted to just go back to sleep. Hannah's mom eventually also told her to, sleep away from the window, and before she fell back asleep, she remembers seeing two of the lizard beings looking in her room through the window and no longer hearing any noise from Tippy. When morning came, Hannah rushed outdoors in her PJs to, check on her beloved pet, and Tippy was waiting like nothing had happened. The occurrence was never discussed between Hannah and her mom again until shortly before her mom's passing in 2016, when she asked Hannah if she remembered seeing the lizard people and their ship in their yard in Colorado. Creepy. Number 1. 7 donuts in the sky. On May 19th of 1952, an aircraft flying an RB-36 aircraft reported spotting a series of several donut shapes appearing in the sky, and were able to take photographs to accompany their incident report, which can be found in National Archives. The crew of 22 reported flying just south of Sonora when they originally spotted the phenomenon, stating that the plane was headed on a 301 degree heading at 18,000 feet, which with relatively calm winds for that altitude. At 8:05 p.m., the objects appeared just to the left of the plane's nose at a range estimated by the crew to be 80 to 120 kilometers ahead. The objects were stacked vertically from approximately 25 to 60,000 feet, and even with all the photographs and drawings, there is still no definite answer as to what was spotted. And that brings us to the end of our time, and I'm good with not getting beamed up today. If you enjoyed my ramblings, could you help us out by giving this video a like, subscribing if you aren't already, hit the bell for more alien goodness from us here at Top 5 Scary Videos, and I'll see y'all next time, you lovely spooky people.